Welcome back. I'd like to talk today about this whole spectrum that exists in our society that allows the psychopath, the extreme narcissist, to rule in such a destructive way. How the black magician needs an audience and accomplices to perform the acts that he or she does. It is this reason why, when we look at this whole subject of psychopathy and narcissism, that we have to go deep within to see where it is that we fit in to this spectrum. So many of us have come into this situation because of a shock so great that it's shaken us out of our denial, our cognitive dissonance, if you like. And that certainly happened to us. How could this happen to us? How could another human being act like this? How could another human being or corporation that we are told weekly on the television is squeaky clean and working to our best interests, how could what we're confronted with be the complete opposite of this? So we were shaken out of a degree of dissonance because we had to confront this. And it's through this that I'm beginning to understand this whole spectrum. At this point, I'd like to thank Raymond Kirwan, who has just been an interviewee in a wonderful interview with Sarah Westall, and I will give you the link down here because it, like all these wonderful YouTube and social media posts, our knowledge grows, and our knowledge grows about this whole concept of cognitive dissonance. So I'll read out an encyclopedia definition of this. Cognitive dissonance, this is from Encyclopedia Britannica, didn't that still happen, but it certainly doesn't come in those big books for people on our doorstep, but it's still a great resource on the internet. Cognitive dissonance, the mental conflict that occurs when beliefs or assumptions are contradicted by new information. The unease or tension that the conflict arouses in people is relieved by one of several defensive maneuvers. They reject, explain away, or avoid the new information. Persuade themselves that no conflict really exists. Reconcile the differences, or resort to any other defensive means of preserving stability in order in their conceptions of the world and of themselves. The concept was developed in the 1950s by American psychologist Leon Festinger and became a major point of discussion and research. You can see our little puppy Alfie's interested as well, but he can't come in. Shame. This got me thinking because obviously we're all been in a state of this, because it's important for us as we grow up as children to have confidence in the world, confidence in the loved ones, and to some extent those who are brought up in a religious environment, a spiritual confidence in what they're being told. So it would appear that cognitive dissonance can be, in its most extreme form, can result from the abuse of children, particularly those who are yet to form a logical sequence in their minds about the world. So this is why a child who is abused physically, emotionally, or sexually, or abandoned can dissociate, as we say, become cognitive dissonant, and distant from the act. At the same time, this young child is infused, of course, by the darkness, the shame of the person doing this, who has often had this done to themselves. So that that other person could well be in a dissonant state, which doesn't excuse them at all. So deep is this dissonance. That's the situation we found ourselves in. We were shocked out of this, and the more we've looked into this, the more we realise that this cognitive dissonance is the problem. And this is our goal, is how do we shake people out of this when they haven't themselves had a shock? Deep down within them, it is likely there is a knowing about this. In their soul, they know there's something wrong. This is why child abuse, trafficking, ritual abuse, all this, most people want to push aside. It's too difficult. And you hear it all the time on the media. We don't want to go there. This is the very reason why along the way, this is used as blackmail, as people who abuse this cognitive dissonance. The next level of cognitive dissonance is when people begin to realise this, realise the darkness, realise the psychopath they're working under, the psychopathic system they're working under. And rather than not having a will about it, which is the cognitive dissonance, their will somehow is not present, it's been knocked out of them, but those who are willfully blind are making a purposeful decision to become blind to the terrors. Those who lived through the war, trying to understand how a German people could be somehow so blind, apparently, to what's happening in concentration camps. It's worth studying that, because a lot of what I'm going to say was in action there, including propaganda, including drugs, amphetamines, all keeping people in a state of cognitive dissonance. And in fact, if they became willfully blind, the next step would be the blindness disappeared, and what would happen to that? That means they would be executed. So we come on to willful blindness. And it's interesting that the definitions in Wikipedia are legal definitions, and I'll in a minute come to explain why I feel I have a discomfort about that, let's say. So here we go. Willful blindness from Wikipedia, sometimes called ignorance of law, willful ignorance, or contrived ignorance, or Nelsonian knowledge, is a term used in law to describe a situation in which a person seeks to avoid civil or criminal liability for a wrongful act by intentionally keeping himself or herself unaware of facts that would render him or her liable. In United States versus Jewell, the court held that proof of willful ignorance satisfied the requirements of knowledge as to criminal possession and importation of drugs. Why I think this is ironic is that in our experience, the profession that shows the most willful blindness, certainly here in New Zealand, is the legal profession. And this has come a lot from our experience as they turn a blind eye to blatant corruption. They turn a blind eye, and one can begin to recognise how it gets past cognitive dissonance into a state of willful blindness. And also, over the years, I've watched so many people go into the legal profession and study law at university, only to find they can't hack it when they get out. And we're seeing a symptom of this in the news, in recent news, where we see the abuse of young lawyers, particularly women, within the legal profession, an endemic bullying. It is clear that many people go into the law and medicine, I'll come to medicine in a minute, I'm going to let us off the hook either, through a willingness to change something. That somewhere deep down, on certain levels, a doctor wants to heal and a lawyer wants justice. Now that doesn't happen all the time, because there's now other pressures. There's intellectual pressures. People have to go through very trying exams to get through. So there's not just one's heart that has to be in it, one's head's got to be in it as well. And there's the social pressures to be a member of a profession. And there's the parental pressure for their children to succeed in this. Those two are dangerous. And if that is the reason they're going into these professions, then either they'll opt out or they'll get sick. Or they'll succeed and go right to the top as narcissists and even psychopaths. So when a lawyer goes into the profession and realizes what's happening in the world, that they're going to be making money out of convincing judges and juries of certain things, which may or may not be true. And they see how the world works and what's happened particularly over the last 40 years or so, where the money is in the powerful corporations and the powerful institutions, and that's where they're going to get their money and their QC-ness and probably beyond, and even get onto the bench. They'll either become very disillusioned and sick and want to go out, or they'll join. And so therefore, the people that so-called succeed in this situation, there's a high incidence of perpetrators, those who may well have been very abused as kids, but are in the state of denial and have somehow focused themselves on material gain rather than justice. We're seeing in the medical profession many young people, particularly women, who go into medicine for the right reasons, when they qualify, are confronted by powerlessness. Deep down they know that the cause of ill health so much lies in what we've been talking about in this series. This is why I'm doing this. And they can no longer stay in this conflict, this cognitive dissonance. And if they can, they'll leave. And the ones that can leave, and this is a sad reflection on our society, often have partners who can support them. And therefore, doctors themselves are restricted from speaking out on these issues. Lawyers then therefore the ones that go into and survive become willfully blind, and they have to what is going on, or else they're going to talk out. And this is a form of bribery, because they know if they're going to succeed in their profession and get paid well, they have to be blind to what's going on, certainly soul blind to what's going on. And we've tested lawyers in this, and we watch this, and we watch it happening, and we observe it with our minds and our hearts and our bodies. I've said that before, and we know what's going on. The same happens for politicians. we have a relatively new government here, full of younger, keen politicians. And I have no doubt that they've been in a situation that they want to be a part of change. Most will, in society, be in the state of cognitive dissonance when it comes to the stuff we're talking about here. There's a little part of them in their soul that knows this but will not start speaking out about the most important issues. Therefore, we have a system that seems to be divided falsely between left and right, and a population who holds their hands up in horror when they see they're doing the same thing. What happens to the young politician is that they get in and they see what's going on, and either they remain in cognitive dissonance or willfully blind to what's going on. Those who are most damaged will remain in cognitive dissonance and become probably the most psychopathic of the politicians. Those who are willfully blind will become the most devious of politicians, or else they'll leave, or else they'll get sick. Getting back to lawyers, getting sick, those whose, on a soul level, cannot stand what's going on will get sick or suicide, and that's what we're seeing. So when one is lobbying these groups or asking them for help, realize where this disease lies within them. From my point of view, seeing what's going on, in an odd way, I offer to help by opening up the conversation. And by opening up the conversation, I detect whether it's worth going further or not. And I have to say, in 95% of the cases, it's probably not worth carrying on. And there's a degree of despondence. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing here. Every day I am seeing people in my rooms who are subjected to the trauma, physical, life-threatening trauma, from relationships with malignant narcissists, from relationships within work. And it seems to be that our profession and our whole health profession is cognitively dissonant to this. The next step is to not convince those who are willfully blind, but to convince those who have it in their heart and their soul to understand what's going on and will break through this dissonance for the sake of themselves, but also their children and grandchildren and everybody else. And that's you guys. I want you guys to help. And this is the reason I'm doing this series and why the short series has become a long series, because the answer to this is through this sort of network, social media. Those who have woken up to this, working out ways that we can help others wake up and support them through the trauma of what is happening in this world. Thank you. Bye.